It's on.
Okay, very good. So I'm going to just say this is Lou Martin, and I've invited my two American friends here, who I had the great pleasure of meeting a few months ago on the Unity World Week program. I got into, there were 90 people on the Zoom call, and then I got to pick which room I wanted to go into, and their room was something about justice, and I said, sure, that sounds great. And so I met Andrew and Andreana, and here we are trying to make sense of it all one more time. How are you guys doing?
Yeah.
Good, positive. The sun is shining. I can't complain.
As good as can be expected. Yeah, I mean, that's right. The sun is shining, the birds are chirping, God's in his heaven, and we have some political issues that we're dealing with in this country. But over time, I think in the long scheme of things, it's going to work out.
Sure.
I say that, but there's a heaviness that I think we are all feeling, and so
sure.
I can't dismiss that. But generally, we're healthy, thank God, and I hope that you are too, and your family.
Yes, all good. All good here. Yeah. Well, fantastic. So, of course, your mother, father and daughter. There we go. We'll get the pronouns right. The gender, and both of you have been studying the Bahai faith and practicing that. And so I would love to introduce people to what that's about and how that helps you navigate the challenges in life. So ladies first, and then we'll go to Andrew, if that's all right.
Absolutely, sure.
Brilliant. All right.
Well, I was actually going to say start with Dad because his journey starts before mine. But I'm happy to just begin the conversation about it.
Sure.
So I was born into a Baha'i family, but what I think is so amazing about the Baha'i faith is you really have to find it for yourself. It's not something that is, handed down to you or, that you are expected necessarily to believe in, even if you are born into a Baha'i family. And so it was really a journey for me, as much as it was for my parents, to read a lot of different faiths, to read a lot of different holy books, to read science, to read philosophy, and to really realize at one point that all of these teachings, when they resonate at your heart level and in your mind, really they are speaking different aspects of the same truth. Mm-hmm. And that to me is the core of what the Baha'i faith offers to the world, is not only the fact that these truths are all woven together in the same tapestry, but the Baha'i faith also offers a way to then bring that into the world as it is now, as we are facing it, as we are looking into the future. What are the forces of darkness and the forces of light that are being unleashed right now? And then how do we work to build, a world that is just and fair for everyone?
Sure.
So that's kind of what resonated with me as I got older, but I'll let Dad kind of leap in and tell how he found the faith, and then I'll, share a little more. Yeah.
Lovely. Dad?
Well, actually, I found the faith in 1974. Mm-hmm. I had been born in 42 to parents of Hungarian descent. My father and his brother came to this country at the height of Nazi occupation in Europe. My father, his family was Jewish. Right. Part of the family escaped Europe. Part ended up having to live through the Nazi occupation.
Right.
And my mother, my mother had been born in this country to Hungarian parents who came over prior to World War I.
Right.
So we're an immigrant family. I'm first generation on my father's side, and not raised Jewish. For some reason, because of probably what was going on in Europe, he didn't want me raised Jewish. We had lived out in a northern Chicago suburb, and the only church in the area really was the village church, which was Presbyterian in Northbrook, Illinois.
Do you know where I'm from?
Huh?
Do you know where I'm from originally, Andrew?
No.
Riverside.
Oh, really? You talking about Riverside, California, or in Illinois?
That's the one.
That's the one. Oh, well.
Yes.
Welcome to a fellow Illini.
Well, there you go. See, that was too good not to throw that in right away.
Good,
Yes,
good.
carry on.
Yeah,
That's
and my
great.
mother's side of the family was Christian, though not practicing. And so I was raised with two sides of the family, and I got a little bit of religion from both sides, and continued in being church going until I was in my mid-teens. And like a lot of teenagers, I thought, well, and this just does not resonate with me. I'm not interested in it, and sort of dropped the Christian faith at that point, and had been, I think, faithless in terms of organized religion for the next 15, 17 years.
Right.
And I had traveled the country in my work, but we were back in Illinois at that time, again in the northern suburbs of Chicago.
Right.
On the Lake Michigan shore side in the town of Wilmette, Illinois, which is near Evanston,
Right.
there's a large edifice which is known as the Bahai House of Worship. It's
Okay.
a very beautiful lattice work sculptured temple.
Right.
And I had passed it many times on my way to work, never curious about it. And one day I received a postcard in the mail about what the Baha'is call a fireside. It's just a group of people getting together and exchanging ideas. The Baha'i faith is not a proselytizing religion, so we don't push our theories on anybody.
Right.
Like Andreana said, you find it with your mind and your heart.
Sure.
And the most that a Baha'i will do if you ask for it is to give you a book, because one of the tenets of the faith is the independent investigation of truth.
Right.
We're told in our faith that we're born with the ability to know the truth, but what happens as we grow older is that human institutions take over, school and church and all kinds of other organizations, and they create these filters, these veils on our soul, on our minds.
Right.
And then to get rid of all of that requires some study. It takes effort. It's one thing to go to church, and there's nothing wrong with it. Many people go to church and they listen to a sermon and they take what they can from it and they live their lives accordingly. But in the Baha'i faith, it really requires some study, because you really have to understand what the essence of God and essence of religion is. And to do that, to understand the relationship between the underlying truths that extend to all religions and all people of the world. I mean, I like to say, there are 7 billion people in this world, and there are 7 billion paths to God. And so we each have a truth that we need to discover. And God and the Baha'i faith and its founder, Baha'u'llah, came for everybody, not just for the Baha'is. And so it just takes time. It's like turning a battleship in mid-water. I mean, there's a big turning radius there. There's a lot of mass there.
Sure.
So anyway, I became a
Yeah.
Baha'i in '74, and Andreana's mother, who is now deceased, became a Baha'i in Australia in 1974, and we met in Southern California, in a home of mutual friends who also were of the Baha'i faith. Were married there, and a few years later, Andreana came along, and kind of that's where we are.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, that's fantastic. I'd love to know more about the teacher, Baha'u'llah, and I know nothing of this person's history and all of that. Would either of you like to tell us about that?
I think Dad should go for it. He's the teacher here.
Well, yeah, only in the sense that I've just had a little more history than Andreana has. I mean,
sure.
Baha'u'llah is
We'll give you the next round, Andreana. Sure.
Okay, sounds good.
I'll make this short, Lou. Baha'u'llah.
That's lovely.
He was a person, an individual who was born in 19th century Iran in 1817. At that time, it was called Persia.
Right.
And always had these inescapable qualities of kindness and attention to the poor that surrounded him. He was always ministering to their needs, even from a very young age.
Beautiful.
One of his designations in life early in Iran was he was called the father of the poor. And he would always pay attention, no matter what background. And they had several religious backgrounds in Iran. They had Jewish, and they had Christian, and they had Zoroastrian, and certainly they had Muslim. And as he developed through life, eventually he became an adherent of another individual who was an expectation of Shia Islam, which was called the return of the Mahdi, or an expected one. He was titled "He Who Will Arise," and this happened in 1844. This was a young man who was titled the Bab, B-A-B, means the gate. And if you look on the internet in Haifa,
Right.
Israel, you will see a temple, his burial place on Mount Carmel. It's a beautiful garden going up in terrace steps all the way up Mount Carmel.
Wow.
Baha'is have been associated with Palestine and now Israel since the later part of the 19th century. Baha'u'llah, because of his beliefs, the Bab, of course, earlier, because it was a threat to Shia Islam, was executed 9 years after he began preaching. And there were somewhere in the neighborhood of 100,000 to 200,000 adherents at that time for the Babi religion, the religion of those following the Bab.
Right.
After he died, Baha'u'llah, whose name means the glory of God, that wasn't his original name, but it was his assumed name as a religious personage, because this happens in the East. You know, they take on a religious title. So his title meant the glory of God. He was immediately the leader of these Babis, which morphed eventually into the Baha'i faith over time. I'm giving you the shortened version.
That's fine.
But because of his belief, and because he was attracting so many people to the faith, he was exiled first by the Qajar dynasty, the Shahs of Iran, and then the Ottomans took over because, of course, they were Shia Islam, Sunni Islam, and then they exiled him further to Constantinople, to Adrianople, and then eventually to Akka, which was in Israel. And that's where the Baha'i faith became established and has been there ever since. And that was 1873.
Wow.
So yeah, so it's a long, fascinating history. Most of the West does not know about it, but most of the West doesn't know a lot about Muhammad either. And that faith has got over 1 billion adherents in the world.
Sure.
So
Yes.
all faiths start out small, but over hundreds of years, they develop their constituency. And Baha'is like to believe that over the next perhaps several 100,000 years, they too will become a major player in the world of religion. Just takes time, that's all. Is that enough? Is that good?
Yeah, that's a great taster there. That's a great introduction. Absolutely. That's brilliant. And Andreana, do you want to pick that thread up and put it anywhere?
Yeah, there's just a couple things. Dad gave a beautiful sort of overview of the history. I just want to point out two things that are, to me, very special about Baha'u'llah and about the Baha'i revelation. So he received, just as Muhammad and Christ, each of these messengers receives, at one point in their life, a message from the angels, from God, the voice of God. Yes. They receive this. And Baha'u'llah also received this calling when he was in one of the most terrible prisons. He had been thrown in prison because he was an adherent, as Dad said, of the Bab, this new faith leader. And he was in this dark black pit under the city. And at one point he received what he described as like a torrent like being under a waterfall. And he heard the voice of what was later described as the maid of heaven. And the Holy Spirit, came to him and gave him this revelation. But to me as a woman, it's very important that at the inception of the Baha'i faith, the point where the messenger received his mission, it was the voice of a woman, the embodiment of the Holy Spirit that came to him.
Sure.
That is very important. I think it's important for the fact that the Baha'i faith stands for the equality of men and women from the beginning, and how important that is in the balance of the world today, because we can see what happens when those forces, those energies of masculine and feminine are not in balance.
Yes.
So that's important. And the other thing that I think is very important is that Baha'u'llah and his family, his wife went with him, his children went with him in exile, and they were imprisoned for all of their lives, basically. His children eventually were able to be released and do the work of the Baha'i faith from Israel. But But the fact that he experienced imprisonment his entire life, and speaking as an American, knowing the fact in this country of mass incarceration and massive injustice, and the fact that so many souls are imprisoned either physically or mentally.
Sure.
I think it's very important that the founder of our religion experienced imprisonment and came for the freedom of everyone.
Yes.
Those two things are very important to me.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, it's understandable. Wow. I mean, what I love about both of you guys is, you know, you really both come from such a deep place of compassion and sincerity and devotion. And, you know, bless you both for all of that. Yeah, sure. And, you know, I'm just flashing back again about our first conversation there a few months ago and how it was about justice. And, you know, it was really kind of in the middle of everything exploding, I think, around George Floyd and some of these things in the States. And, you know, we were chatting, of course, before we started recording here about how precarious the world is and America is at this moment. And it certainly is, you know, I channel my spirit guides. I've been doing this for years. And so they give me all these little quotes to share with people. And the quote for the moment is that we're going through a planetary healing crisis, you know, and like we know, crisis is danger and opportunity, you know, as we hear from the I Ching. And so, you know, all of us people of good faith are saying our prayers, are treating others the way we want to be treated, are, you know, donating to the causes that move us, that we can support, thank you, God. And, you know, and we see a lot of people who have no mooring, no center, no values, don't know which way is up, you know, and they're really,
struggling.
you know, yeah, there you go. So I don't know what more to say about that, but I'm just welcoming if there's more either of you want to say about how we're all personally navigating these difficult, challenging times.
Well, I know. Anna,
that's a big one. I have a few thoughts, but go ahead, Dad.
Do you want to comment, Andreana?
Well, I'll just say something, just briefly, in terms of the fact that I have many conversations like this with my friends,
sure,
who are such alive people, you know, people who are truly alive, who want everyone to be alive in the way that we are meant to be. But we all of us are struggling and feeling the weight of what's happening to ourselves, to others. So for me, this is also a period of intense inner work.
Right.
You know, people are taking to the streets, people are protesting. Those efforts are raising consciousness, and they are raising awareness. They're providing an outlet for this pent up pain and anger, and it's totally understandable. But I always go back to the fact that none of these movements for peace, for justice, they can't be sustainable unless internally we are doing the change work in our hearts and our minds. You know, uprooting. I mean, all of us have these voices in our heads, these beliefs about ourselves that are toxic, that are not true. And until we start to address that in ourselves, we need a time of quarantine, of lockdown, when we can't be with our friends, we can't have as many distractions in the outer world. It is a time of going inside and reflecting. And for me, that's been, for me personally, healing. I know for others, it's not, because they may be on the front line, or they may not have a job, or there's so many stressors right now. So I feel very lucky that I do have some reflection time. But I feel that for those of us who can do that, we must. It is an imperative. So I think that's part of the response to what the energy is right now, is not to get so freaked out, but also to ground ourselves in that, as you say, that vertical connection to our earth and to our, you know, creator. And that is essential. Sorry, go ahead, Dad.
No, that's great. That's lovely.
No,
Yeah.
Lou, I was going to ask you, how much time do we have for this?
As much as you like, my friend. Yes. I mean,
Okay, well, I don't want to overburden your viewers, but
I'll wave at you. No, you were not even near that.
okay,
Go
all
on
right.
with yourself. Yeah.
Well, you hear in this country a lot of, the Black Lives Matter movement,
Right.
which is now
Yeah.
spread around the world,
Yes.
especially in Western societies. Um, you hear the statement being made often where they say, no justice, no peace.
Yeah.
So I want to, can I be allowed to read a short passage to you from a Baha'i writing that comes from a very short, a small book of aphorisms and sayings
Lovely.
called The Hidden Words.
Yes,
This
please. Of course.
particular one has to do with justice, and it
Okay.
has to be understood in the context of God speaks to humankind, okay, through this
Okay.
person, through Baha'u'llah.
Okay.
So this can be taken as today's words for God on the subject of justice, okay?
Beautiful.
So that's the
Yes. Thank you.
preface.
Very good.
So it says, the best beloved of all things in my sight is justice. Turn not away therefrom if thou desirest me, and neglect it not that I may confide in thee. By its aid thou shalt see with thine own eyes, and not through the eyes of others, and shalt know of thine own knowledge, and not through the knowledge of thy neighbor. Ponder this in thy heart, how it behooveth thee to be. Verily justice is my gift to thee, and the sign of my loving kindness. Set it then before thine eyes.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yes.
This lofty language, the King James Bible and Baha'i writings are written in a type of lofty language. And, there's a reason for that. The words of the King James Bible at the time of King James in Britain were to create a language that reflected the loftiness of the words that were being given. It wasn't meant to be in common tongue, so to speak, in idiomatic language. The Baha'i faith is the same way as other faiths. They choose a high level language to present their words because it's coming from on high, so to speak, from the spiritual world. I think that another thing that humankind is going to eventually come to is the fact that while we live in a material world, human beings actually have two natures, not one. We have a physical nature, which is in the material realm, which has a tendency to get ego bound. We have another nature, which is the spiritual nature, which we haven't really encouraged as much historically. We've spent all our time worrying about survival and how the material realm deals with survival. But we haven't worried so much about spiritual survival. And this, I think, Lou, similar to what you and your friends talk about, is going to be what's going to happen in this day and age. More credence is going to be given to the spiritual than the material side. Anyway.
Bless you. Yeah, I amen to that, brother. I quite agree with that, as you might imagine. And that is a beautiful passage. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
When my guides say, when you're moved, when you feel you're stirred, that is your spirit waking up in you. The tears that begin in sorrow end in joy, because through compassion and the search for justice, the hunger and thirst after wisdom and knowledge, that lights us up from within when we start to begin to be open to new answers and new possibilities. I love what both of you have just expressed there.
Oh, good.
Because this is, the joke is that 2020 is the year of the visionary.
That's
because we have to see beyond the current paradigm in order to survive the current transition phase here. And when we have dreams and we have inspiration and we're moved and stirred, as I certainly am by what both of you are sharing and your examples, my heart opens with great hope, and I say, all things are possible to those who believe. This is our time, is how I would, respond to what we're saying here. And the world needs what we have been practicing, as you were saying, Andreana. If we have a daily place within to retreat and keep cleansing our side of the glass, is my little metaphor, then I have something to offer that actually feels meaningful and hopeful. And, people without a vision, people perish, and there's a lot of people that have no vision right now. And they're the ones that really are struggling because as you said, both of you, we're spirits in the material world. And if we give ourselves time and space to practice and to surrender and to learn from that, then we get filled up with those loving energies. If we just look outside of ourselves for everything, then we feel empty within, and nothing is ever enough. Yeah.
It's so true. And just to speak to that vision piece a little bit, and also the practical piece in terms of how we build that vision, there is the inner work aspect. And then there's, for me, the relational aspect. And, the Baha'is very practically around the world, we're based in all countries, all provinces. So we have a global reach. In all of those places, the work of the Baha'i faith is to build community, and not only community within the Baha'i context, within our little group, but to build community with the wider world, to build community with all faith groups, people who don't have a faith, all colors, all creeds, all of it. And so that vision of what does the world look like in 100 years, in 50 years, in 500 years? It is this greater community and these truly spiritual and pure relationships between, people in institutions, in government, everywhere. These relationships have to be cleansed because there is no trust right now. There is no love for our, deep love for our leaders or our government, widespread, no matter what party you adhere to. And so I think that relational work is the second piece of it, right? It's like the inner relationship and then the outer relationships and how that's manifest in the world.
No, that's right. I've had the great privilege of sitting with a lot of indigenous people, and they would absolutely celebrate what you're saying as well, both of you, because that it's the tribe of many colors, the rainbow warriors, and these kinds of things, and this is one of the prophecies that when the earth looks like it's dying, humanity will find the best within itself and rise together and transcend these illusions of separation. Create.
Lou, can I interject something here from a slightly different angle? I'm sorry, Anna, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
I want to comment a little bit. This I'm going to take, because another aspect of the Baha'i faith, if I can be so bold, has to do with the equality between science and religion. It's very similar to what Albert Einstein said, where religion without science is a superstition and science without religion is blind. Okay?
Yeah.
In physics, in science, there's this notion of open and closed systems, okay? A closed system has within it all of its energy needs, but those energy needs eventually run out because there's no inputs, okay?
Right.
A human being is an open energy system.
Yeah.
We take energy from our environment, we use it up, but we replenish ourselves, although over time, of course, the system runs down.
Sure.
But society is very similar too, because society, if it closes itself and doesn't receive inputs, energy inputs, eventually it too wears down. That's another reason why we have these cycles of history. We build up to things and it eventually tapers off, kind of like a roller coaster ride.
Sure.
So the inputs for humankind, for society, are spiritual inputs. That's where we receive our energy from. The physical inputs eventually will wear down. But for society to continue in a more balanced way over time, it's going to have to balance out its physical and its spiritual needs. That's what's out of whack right now.
Sure. Well, let me just speak to that very briefly, and then we'll let Andreana have another word. I know you have a schedule here. I won't keep either of you too long today. But I love what you're saying there, Andrew. I mean, this is why America is so special in the world, you see, because America has been that open society for the cultures and the brilliance and the imagination and the freedom-loving people of the world to have a sanctuary, to have a place to come home to. And that's why what's happening politically and socially is so shocking, you know. It just seems, isn't it, that you know, there are seasons and cycles, you know, that human consciousness has to go through, like the weather. And some days are bright and sunny, and thank you God, and other days are just wind and rain and lightning, and we're just huddling under the bed to get through it. So I love your point about open and closed systems. I'm a huge Einstein fan. I think he was one of the great mystics of our world, and one of the great humanitarians, absolutely, as well as an amazing scientist. But I like his quote. I thought you were going to throw us this one, Andrew, where he says, the choice is either nothing is a miracle or everything is. And I'm like, yes, my mystical brother, that's where I live. You see, that's where I live. You know, or that imagination is infinitely more valuable than information. The one that I used to see in Santa Cruz, I think I bought this at the bookshop Santa Cruz when I was going to school there, was great minds have always encountered violent opposition from mediocre, or great spirits have often encountered violent opposition from mediocre minds. So it's somehow to make peace with these changes in ourselves from a place of humility and integrity, and trusting God's will in our lives, and sharing that as we are, and giving people a space for grace is the phrase from my guides here, you know. Yeah, there you go. My lady took a breath there. So it's your side, my side, and then something in the middle, you know. And as we know, divide and conquer, whether it's the pandemic and the lockdown and how that's affecting the economy, or it's Trumpy and Uncle Joe, or whatever it might be, you know, we're really being hit from all sides these days. So it's good we can talk about these things with other intelligent people, other grown-ups.
It is.
Yes.
No, I'm just, I love that phrase, a space for grace, because people are using this word a lot now, creating space, because the world is contracting. And I always like to use the metaphor of the birthing process. Yes. You know, there's these pangs, these sharp, horrible contractions that you feel they're never going to end. It's, you know, it's so dark. And then there's the breath. And then we have to, you know, as people of faith, good faith, whatever your faith is, you know, create those breath moments for more and more people. It's not an accident that the last cries of our Black brothers and sisters has been, I can't breathe. This is not an accident. We have to hear that, all of us. It is a cry for this world right now. And I think that I really take that to heart, even in my work as a writer, because you think, well, what can words do? You know, I'm so sick of words. Like, let's stop talking, let's just start doing stuff. And that's true. But for me, if words lead again to insight, to imagination, to breakthroughs, to connection between us. You know, so I give these, you know, writing workshops and listen to people's voices and their stories, because that really, I feel, is so pent up right now. There's this need to share, this need to be seen, need to be heard. And I feel that as you say, if we can create those spaces for each other and for ourselves, that birthing process is going to, I think, move forward.
I'd like, can I say one thing, Lou, regarding what Andreana just said about words? I agree with her totally about the power of words. I think we should be cautious also, because words can do the opposite. And there are people alive nowadays, leadership that uses words in ways that aren't always productive for humankind. And I think that all of us, well, that was a forerunner of some of this. Absolutely. But there is a tendency on the part of too many people to think uncritically. It's a skill that can be learned, but unfortunately it requires energy and effort. And
Sure.
we can't look at everything that's said to us uncritically and just say, well, everything is right. Because if everything is right, everything could be wrong too.
Sure, sure, sure.
So
No,
we have to be really careful with the power of words and be careful what we put into our minds and our hearts. Because if we don't filter some of that stuff, it can do great damage.
well, that's right. That's right, my friend. And I can't help but add to what you're building on there, the two of you. My joke is the truth will set you free, but it'll usually piss you off first. You know, and that tends to be my experience with these things. You know, what I feel as we're coming down the home stretch here, guys, what I feel is that you know, as both of you I think said, we do have the truth in us at birth. You know, that is a core part of the teaching of this master that has been you know, creating followers on earth for over a century now, and that's beautiful. It's that we tend not to trust that truth, or as you said about filters earlier, we tend to give that away, et cetera, et cetera. But again, what crisis keeps doing is it demands resolution.
Right.
It says, you know, things cannot sustain the way they are, and
Right.
we need life to be sustainable. So, you know, words are valuable, of course, I believe that, Andreana, and important. But yes, everyone's going to come at them, Andrew, from their own angle. And, you know, my guides say the heart knows what the mind struggles to believe and understand. So again, when we're taking time and making space every day for peace and blessing the world, blessing each other, blessing what's unfolding, blessing our enemies, all of these noble practices, you know, we do tend to let go of our attachments to things, and we're more available to see the new picture, the new image, the new vision.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Both of you forgive me, I'm gonna have
Sure.
to bail in a couple of minutes.
Sure, sure.
But Lou, whether it's just private conversations between us, just to, you know, reinforce the struggle we have in trying to get others to understand this concept of where is humankind going, or just checking in periodically to see how things are in Ireland compared to America. I mean, we can certainly do that.
I'm thrilled to be your friend here.
I'm going to wave off goodbye now and let you two do it. I'll set one of you up as a host.
Great.
And then you can end the recording and do all that kind of stuff. Is that okay?
Perfect, Andrew. That's great. Thank you. And I'll take a look at Arnold Toynbee, and I'm glad we both know Isaac Asimov, and his foundation trilogy has been made into a TV series. So
I've heard so. I hope they do it justice.
I'm sure they will.
All right, Lou, here you go.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you, brother. Yep.
All right. Love you all. Bye-bye.
You too. Peace and blessings.
Bye-bye.
Bye.